Mr. Krabs, I have an idea. That's probably what either Danny Boyle or Alex Garland said to the other one when they first pitched the idea of making this new trilogy. I'm just remembering now as I'm starting to record this that I actually had a dream the other day where me and Drist recorded a very long video for the Auburn Rash channel, and then I realized like at the very end that I completely forgot to set the mic up properly. So now I'm super nervous that that's going to happen for some reason. The 28 Years Later just came out, and I saw it about like a week ago by the time you're seeing this. It's only been like 3 or 4 days by the time I'm recording this, and I loved it. As I'm sure a fair amount of you might know if you've been subscribed to my channel for a few years now, and I think some of you discovered my channel from that video, but it was my original 28 Days Later video I made back in like 2022. I don't think it's aged that well, and I don't really like it that much. I kind of want to make a new deep dive into the whole franchise at some point, but for now, I'll leave that as is, and I'll keep this here as kind of like my official review for now of 28 Years Later. But yeah, 28 Days Later, if you don't know, is my favorite movie of all time. I've always been a big horror person, and that's primarily what I go see in the theaters. I do like to go see a lot of movies every year if I can. And if I can afford to, because the tickets are fucking expensive these days, to be going like once a week or something. But primarily what I always want to see every year, like at least I make sure I can see them, is the horror films that I'm interested in seeing. I feel like seeing them in a theater is the best way to fucking do it. And horror movies have been my shit since I was very young. Like, I was always very scared of them as a kid, but then around the ages of like 8 or 10 years old, I always kind of like zombies and stuff like that, and Friday the 13th, but my horizon started to expand into real horror by that age because of stuff like Scream and Friday the 13th and stuff like that, but also because of internet horror and creepypastas. 28 Days Later has pretty much been my favorite movie since I saw it back when I was like 14 or 15. I kind of had seen it before that once-ish before when I was a kid at my grandma's house. I saw everything from like them getting into that apartment where the Frank and his daughter is, all the way up until when Frank died, because when they get to the mansion, and my grandmother very quickly picked up on where it was going from there, but I was too young to understand, obviously, so she was like, oh, we're not going to watch the rest of this movie. And I was like, why not? That movie was fucking sick. I was enjoyed that a lot, and then I was terrified about it later on. But I ended up seeing 28 Weeks Later all the way through because my brother showed it to me when I was... It might have been before 28 Days Later even, because I always liked zombies, and he was like, oh, you should check this out. This one's really going to actually freak you the fuck out. And he probably knew it would too, because like Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead scared me when I was that age. And he was like, after showing me Dawn of the Dead, he was like, better show him one of the most intense zombie movies on the market right now. So that movie petrified me. And then years later, when I was like 14 or 15, I finally watched the first one all the way through because I got it for Christmas, I think. And I fucking instantly loved it. I set the mood right for it too. I waited till it was like getting later, then I turned all the lights off in my room, and the only thing I could really see was my TV, and I had my headset on for like full immersion. That's one of the best ways to watch that movie, I feel like, by the way, since the sound design is... you could tell the film is definitely old, and like as it gets re-released and re-released again on different streaming services, I feel like some parts of the sound design get worse and worse, which is strange. Like the music in the beginning when he's exploring London, if you watch it right now on whatever streaming service it's on, it will be quiet, really quiet. And the part at the end where the dude is revealing to Jim that they are in quarantine, you cannot hear a single word he is saying. On like watching it on your TV at like a normal decent volume, everyone I've watched it with, they have to turn it up, and the only thing that they're able to catch is like the last part of this guy's long speech. So yeah, I feel like watching it with headphones on was the best way to do it, because it really immersed me into it. It got me into that shit immediately. And as someone who's loved zombies his whole life, I immediately fell in love with 28 Days Later and how unique it felt, even though I could kind of tell watching it at 15 that a lot of the cliches and stuff that I knew from zombie movies of the last 20 years came from that movie. But for some reason in 28 Days Later, those cliches don't feel like cliches. It just feels like a good movie, like a very solid, well done, kind of an art piece of a movie that tries a lot of different things and lands on just about every aspect that it can. So I instantly fell in love with it. I watched 28 Weeks Later again, and I didn't like it as much now that I had seen the first one and gained like a whole new appreciation for it. I made my video about it years later. I kind of like 28 Weeks Later now. Let me say that. I think 28 Weeks Later is definitely like the black sheep of the franchise, especially since this new continuity doesn't even seem to acknowledge it much at all. It's not a bad movie, though. It is a very solid zombie thriller, but compared to the first one, it just doesn't hold that same weight, in my opinion. I know it's some people's favorite of the franchise, which is fine. I don't agree with the opinion, though, when people say that it's better than the first one or that it's better than the new movie. I don't think that it is on the same level of like risk taking and as interesting as those. I think this one plays it relatively safe compared to the others. But I can totally get why people would love it, because I mean, like, that opening scene I think is a masterpiece. It's one of my favorite opening scenes in any horror movie ever made. There's some action scenes in 28 Weeks Later that are like simply iconic and just exhilarating to watch. And that's like the whole movie. So I get why people would like that. But in my personal opinion, 28 Days Later as like a franchise, and especially its original, was never really entirely about the infected and like scary zombie action scenes. They were a cherry on top of an already well-cooked cake about like the end of the world kind of drama narrative. And in a way, I kind of prefer the way that they used the infected back in the original. I felt like it was more sparing and memorable because of that, because every time the infected showed up in that movie, it was a big deal. It wasn't just like another scene where they were like, quick, we gotta run away. Like, it's pretty much every scene in 28 Weeks Later. And also, I mean, just the overall plot of them trying to rebuild London and then immediately falling back into shit because of two dumbass children is just not that interesting to me, and it just kind of feels like a scrapped idea for a Resident Evil movie. So this one kind of focuses more on just, and the new movie kind of focuses more on just being like a legacy sequel to the original, but also it's its own thing entirely, which is what I love so much about it. Let me just, now that I've went on way too long about that, it's time to actually talk about this movie for real. I already said I loved it, and I do. I seriously love this movie. I don't think it's, oh, my bad. I don't think it's as good as the original, obviously. I don't really think any movie's going to top that one for me. It just has such a special place in my heart. But I thought that this was just about as great as a sequel to 28 Days Later you can make. It did just about everything I hoped it would, and even more so. It really takes a lot of risk and pushes the envelope, which is why I think that this one has been one of the more, I don't want to say controversial. I'm forgetting the word that I'm looking for, but it's been very kind of splitting for certain audiences. There's a lot of people who hate this movie, and I think those people, you don't have to like the movie, obviously, but a lot of their reasoning for why it's a bad movie is just not accurate and also completely misrepresents the film that they saw. Like, you obviously don't have to enjoy what they gave you here, but you also don't need to like lie and be like, this is a bad movie and anyone who likes it is an idiot just because you didn't like it. Like, that's such a lame mindset to have to me. So yeah, if you came here expecting me to like validify your negative and very harsh takes about this movie, I'm sorry, but that's not what this is going to be. This is just going to be from my perspective as someone who's loved 28 Days Later. Since the first time I saw it, it's my favorite movie, and this is one of those movies where it's hard to even believe that I'm in the timeline where it exists, you know, which I know that might sound hyperbolic, but there was a very, very long point of time where a lot of us fans of this franchise were convinced that we would just never see it again. And that sucked ass, but we just kind of had to accept it. So like that fateful day in October where this trailer randomly got dropped, and they did a good job keeping it a secret too, because I'm sure some people knew that this was going to happen already, but I don't think that I knew that 28 Years Later was going to happen until that trailer came out. Because I remember doing research about it years ago when I was making my 28 Days Later video. I found an interview with Danny Boyle saying, oh, it could be interesting to do another one, blah, blah. By then, they were probably already in talks about doing this movie, you know? Like, I heard that this movie was shot very quickly, which is impressive for how well it turned out, but, like, I feel like this has been an idea on their mind for quite some time now, especially considering that they pretty much made two movies back to back. This one directed by Danny Boyle, the next one coming out in January will be directed by Nia DaCosta, which is pretty cool. But Danny Boyle's already talked about how they pretty much have mapped out this whole trilogy of new films in like this very specific formula. They all know how these films are going to bleed into the next one and what it will all look like in the big grand picture. This has been something that they've wanted to do for a while, clearly. And it is the most passion project fucking legacy sequel I've ever seen. Legacy sequels, especially in horror, have been coming heavily these last few. Coming, coming like the big dicks in this movie. No, okay, I'll stop. But there's been a lot of those coming out in the last, I mean, since like fucking forever, but like especially since like 2020, I feel a lot of them have come out. We've seen stuff like Scream, Final Destination, and now we're going to be seeing I Know What You Did Last Summer in about a month, which is sick. I hope that one's good. Completely off topic, but god damn it, I hope that movie doesn't suck. I have enjoyed those movies a lot. I enjoyed the new Scream films, and I really enjoyed Final Destination Bloodlines a lot. It was my favorite movie that I've seen this year until this one came out. I still haven't seen like Sinners yet though, so please forgive me. I have a good feeling that probably would take the cake as like my favorite movie this year once I do finally get around to watching it. But I just haven't yet, and I'm not entirely sure why I haven't. I kind of wanted to go see it when it came out, but schedule just didn't line up properly. I couldn't really get any of my friends together at the same time to see it, so one of my friends saw it. Drist, my co-host from Auburn Rat, saw it and said it was good, and I have not seen it, but I'm very excited to watch it. I love vampires, and I think Ryan Coogler is a very, very impressive director. That guy has an insanely impressive like catalog of movies that he's worked on. And also, both of these movies have Jack O'Connell in them in some way, which is pretty interesting. I'm excited to see what he's like in the second one. I'll talk more about the ending later. I will say for right now, though, I think it's good. You know, I'll just get it out the way before I forget. I think the ending was really interesting and really like sets the stage for the next film well. And I don't really understand why so many people are as mad about it as they are. Yeah, it's silly and it kind of comes out of left field compared to the rest of the tone of the movie, but like you gotta remember, this is 28 years into an apocalypse that these people have been surviving in. And this kid was like 7 when this shit first started, alright? So he grew up in a world where he idolized, what's that fucking guy's name? So he grew up idolizing Jimmy Savile, and they never knew that he was a bad guy, obviously, because by then Jimmy is probably fucking dead from the infection, but also his crimes never fully came into tuition. And I've seen some people pointing out that people knew back in 2002 that some people knew that he wasn't a great guy back in 2002, but I don't really think that that's something a little kid would know as much, you know, like. If they heard about it in the news or something, they wouldn't really understand it. When you're like 7 years old, you don't really understand like what that shit means, you know? Like when I was younger, I didn't fully understand why Bill Cosby was in the news a lot, you know? But then you find out a few years later. I thought it was a pretty cool addition, and I've seen some people say it's kind of like a Mad Max type thing, and I couldn't agree more with that analogy to say that comparison, because it just makes sense, you know, and that exact thing has happened in the Mad Max movies before, where we see characters who like were children or were kind of born into the world as it is now, and because of that, they kind of grow up wrong. They don't grow up to be like normal, sane adults. They turn into this like zany, larger than life fucking caricature of an adult, what they think a cool badass adult looks like, because they don't actually know. And I personally think it's really cool that they're taking such a different approach to like what the human antagonists are going to look like this time around, because I think they've already pretty much confirmed, and like what we kind of put the pieces together and take a look at how cruel and fucked up these guys are, from that like corpse that they strung up in the beginning with a bag over its head. I mean, the infected, he wasn't dead. So speaking of which, I almost laughed out loud in the theater when that one Swedish guy, Eric, says zombies in this movie, I was so happy. I was over the moon that someone in this movie, in the fucking movie itself, called them zombies. So all you little fucking commenters who still go to my 28 days later video to this day, that several-year-old video, and go, actually, they're not zombies. They just fall under pretty much every qualification of a zombie except for the fact that they're dead. So they're pretty much completely different. Now I have more ammo to use against that kind of fucking response because they said it in the movie. Someone knows that they are zombies, but also I've always know I for years I've seen these interview clips of like Alex Garland and Danny Boyle. Alex Garland especially is an important opinion because he wrote the fucking movie and it came up with these creatures, and he himself has referred to them inside the umbrella term as zombies.
What I felt was I never objected to the word because although these guys were not supernatural, they weren't reanimated dead people. I always thought, yeah, it's a zombie movie. I mean, it's from that genre, it's in that lineage, it's aware of the George Romero stuff and all the other films, and it was just a twist on it, just a spin on it.
He says that they're not traditional zombies, but they're still kind of zombies, you know? Like, I don't think Alex Garland would get mad at me for calling this a zombie film. So, like, why the fuck are random people online coming here to, like, fight the battle on behalf of this guy when he doesn't even give a shit that people don't refer to them as infected all the time? He could care less. But I do think it's really, like, getting back to what I was saying, I think it was a really interesting approach to take such a creative and unique idea to, like, the human villains of this franchise, because human villains in zombie media have always been a thing. Like, they were a big problem in the first movie too. The soldiers are probably some of my favorite human villains in a zombie movie just because they're so insanely evil and unempathetic. It's crazy. But I feel like a lot of the time, and like because of stuff like The Walking Dead kind of popularizing it, a lot of the time, like zombie story human villains, I mean, they feel like samey to me. I don't know how else to put it. Like, a lot of the time it's like a leader type guy who runs a community, and then at first you think he's a chill guy, but then it turns out he's crazy and he has bad intentions, and the only reason he's survived as long as he has is because he's a bad guy. Like, take the governor from The Walking Dead, or David, I think it was, from The Last of Us. Like, you know, I'm just a little bit tired of seeing the same type of character arc. Not necessarily that those characters are bad. I really like the governor a lot in particular, but I just really want them to take a newer approach to like what human evil can look like in a zombie apocalypse, and I think this is a really interesting way to go about it. I also saw someone point out how at the beginning of the film, Spike almost takes this Power Rangers toy with him when his father and him go out into the mainlands for the first time. But he decides to leave it on his nightstand, and he just says, like, see you later, and doesn't ever bring it with him. Doesn't really ever get brought back up again because it's not important to him anymore. It kind of symbolizes him stepping away from the safety of his childhood and becoming, I don't want to say a man because it sounds kind of cringy, but, like, you know, he does become an actual man, unlike his father, who risk his life to bring his mother into the fucking mainlands to try to save her life just because his father won't. And I think that's pretty cool. I like Spike a lot as a character, and Alfie, I don't remember his last name, but the kid actor, for being as young and unexperienced as he is, did a phenomenal job. I immediately liked this character and rooted for him, and I can't wait to see how they build on him in the next movie. But getting back to what I said, on the other end of the spectrum from Spike is Jimmy, you know, the fucking kid from the very beginning who grows up to become that Jimmy Seville type fucking guy, leader or whatever. He, on the other hand, symbolizes the person who couldn't put the Power Rangers down. I saw someone point that out, and I thought that was a really cool way to sum it up. Because of the infection happening when he was so young, he never really grew up properly, kind of like what I was talking about a minute ago. He has this very childlike mindset and doesn't seem to take the situation that he's existed in for so long as seriously as a lot of people do. He's kind of like the opposite of what Spike is, because Spike grew up in this apocalypse. All he has ever known is the end of times in London or whatever in the fucking surrounding places. But so it's much easier for him to actually grow up and adjust to this world the right way and like stay relatively sane, even though everything he's witnessing is fucking insane. But yeah, I can't wait to see what they do with that character next time. I can't wait to see how they make him a villain, because I've seen clips of him in Sinners, and I know Jack O'Donnell is very good at playing a very intimidating piece of shit. Danny Boyle and Alex Garland teaming back up was not something I thought would happen anytime soon again, and especially with something like this. This is the first time since 2007 that these guys have worked together when they made Sunshine, which is a phenomenal movie, by the way. Not enough people have seen that one. And it's one of those creative combos where it just works. You know, you can tell that like they're on the same page, more or less completely on the same page of like what they want this to be. Alex Garland seemed to have gotten what he always wanted this time in this new one, which is that the zombies are butt-ass naked, running around, skinny as fuck with their schlongs swinging in the wind. And fun fact, that's kind of something that he's always wanted for this franchise, even since the beginning. I remember watching the director's commentary where Danny and him were both watching it together and commentating on it. I was watching it for my research on my video I did years ago, whatever. Danny Boyle brings up the fact that at one point during early production, Alex Garland brought up the idea of like, what if the infected were just like full primal? Like they didn't have clothes and they had like full-blown throbbing erections sometimes while they were chasing you. And Danny Boyle was pretty much like, okay, so we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. And it seems like they kind of like met a middle ground in this one and gave themselves both what they wanted, because they are like pretty much all the zombies in this movie, except for the ones in the very beginning, are completely butt-ass naked. But they're not like running around fully erect like these weird rape monsters that Alex Garland kind of wanted them to be originally. And it makes sense for them to be naked too this time, and like having reverted back to their full primal form after being infected for as long as they have. It only makes sense that they would kind of revert back into being animals and run in packs, and there would be alphas and stuff like that. It also kind of helps keep things interesting, because I always wondered how you could even make it work in this long after the infection started, because as we all know, at the end of 28 Days Later, they already are, like, the infected are already starving to death. So it's kind of this difficult predicament where you're like, where I was always wondering if this movie would focus more on like human conflict, which I think we're going to get more in the second movie. So that person who 3 years ago told me it was a stupid idea to think that human conflict would happen in this movie, fuck you. I really liked what they did with the infected in this, because while they are older now and like way skinnier and run down from all the years of fucking heinous shit happening to their bodies inside and out, they still have found ways to survive, and they still manage to be really quick and intimidating despite how skinny they are. Like I'd still be fucking petrified if one of these things was chasing me. I'm still kind of glad that we got like a reminder of the early infected at the beginning of the film. And because these infected in this one do kind of take a different approach. Just like I said, they're mutated and stuff happens with the infected in this one that you wouldn't have expected to happen in the other ones. But that opening scene of the movie especially feels extremely 28 Days Later and even Weeks inspired to me. I thought the idea of taking it back to like the fucking day one moment of just like being in some small suburban neighborhood on mainland England as the infection reaches them, that was really cool, because it's like I don't know, it really plays well into like the themes of anti-war that this franchise has always pushed, especially with this one. But it's just it's such a simple yet terrifying like moment almost, you know what I mean? Just like these kids sitting all crammed together in this living room watching Teletubbies, pretending that the world isn't falling apart around them, and that they're not terrified while their parents run around frantically. And it happens so quickly too. It happened quicker than I thought it would even. You just like hear some shuffling, the kid gets up, he goes and stands by the door, and then all of a sudden, boom, the room they just burst into the fucking room in a second, the infected, and they just fucking eviscerate these poor children and leave the Jimmy by himself fleeing to his father, who is a crazy religious dude who gets killed, but well, not killed, he gets infected because he thinks it's the day of judgment. Fucking dumbass. That guy would have probably thought that COVID was like the judgment day as well, and he would have just been like walking around in the street like, cough on me, my children, yes. What a fucking idiot. I saw some people hating on this intro. I did think it was a little quick and not as intense as it could have been, but I also wasn't expecting it to be on the same level of iconic as like the first two, because the first one has that iconic opening that just works due to the simplicity of it. There's like only like 4 people talking in a lab, and there's a bunch of infected monkeys, and it gets out and infects the people who came to save the monkeys and the scientists, and then boom. And the second movie's opening is one of the most like raw and visceral representations of like what it would be like for people if something like this really happened. How like these people were living safely in this cabin, and then in a second notice that all comes crashing down in the most brutal and terrifying way possible. And that opening is so good that I don't think that they're ever going to be able to top that in a zombie movie, let alone like this franchise. So I wasn't expecting this opening to be scarier than that, but I did love this opening a lot for the sheer simplicity of it and the brutality and how quick it happens, because the quickness of it almost seems intentional, just to like sum up how quickly Jimmy's life just completely fell apart and changed forever. Very, very, very cool opening. The first act of this movie is also really cool. I've seen some people say that it's like the only part that they like, and I don't understand why, because I feel like each act has its own unique vibe and feel to it that's just as exciting as the last one. Every time that you see them leave the island, you get excited. You're like, holy shit, what's going to be waiting for them on the mainland this time? I definitely get the hype around the first part, though, because it's just that feeling of uncertainty and unfamiliarity with like the place that they are, for us anyway. Like they know it, but we don't. We kind of are going in blind with Spike, because this is Spike's first time being outside of the island as well. So it's like it really helps us connect with him as a character and understand why this world is so intimidating and scary even all these years later. It also shows us a lot of like who his dad really is, because at first he seems like kind of like the Joel archetype, which I guess he kind of is, because he's like he's a decent protector, and he's helping his kid get ready for the harsh world that he needs to exist in. But at the same time, he's kind of doing it for more egotistical reasons, and to like boast himself up, like to be like, yeah, I'm the greatest hero of this island, and my son is even a badass because he's only fucking 12 years old and he just kicked a bunch of zombie ass. And he's also cheating on his sick wife, who he seems to just be waiting and counting down the days until she dies, and she's not really a burden to him anymore. And it's a very effective switch up on a character who at first you might think is just going to be kind of like a loving father character. If anything, I was expecting him to die just like very brutally in front of Spike to kind of set a standard for him, and like, but that's not what ended up happening. And I feel like the way that they took it was much more impactful to Spike's growth as a person, and to becoming an adult and becoming a man, because he has to look at his father, who he's always kind of looked to as like his guide and like the one who knows his shit. He has to look at his father and be like, my father is only a man in like physical definition alone. He's a fully grown, bearded, strong guy who's physically capable. But my dad is a liar, and my dad is a cheat, and my dad is kind of a fucking asshole. Did I say dag? He has to come to that realization, and only then is he able to take the big step and embrace the fact that he needs to become like this big he needs to become a brave hunter of sorts to really do things right and get his mom the help that she needs. And that also works in really well with this movie's messaging of death and how it's just unavoidable. And just because we're surrounded by death, or we see death so often, that's not necessarily a reason that we should just give up and accept it. You know, you should, like, you have to still live. because that's what the doctor talks about a lot. You know, he mentions his favorite YouTube channel, Unisanis. um, the doctor that they meet talks about the ideas of memento mori, and I forget the other one, but memento mori, you know, as most of you probably know, it means like to remember that you will die someday, and that it's inevitable. You need to remember that so that you don't let it hold yourself back. You don't hold yourself back from things because you don't waste your time. Essentially, you need to live. And then there's another one that has to do with like memento, whatever the fuck, I forget. I'll put it on the screen because I forget what it is. But he talks about how you must live. You must also live, and you must accept the fact that one day you will die, and otherwise you won't be able to lead a complete life. And that's why this doctor has somewhat come to peace with the infection and the situation he's in, because at first he's kind of built up as this freaky, dangerous guy, but when we meet him, you quickly realize that he is definitely like a kooky doctor, but he's probably one of the most empathetic and human characters of the whole, and like this whole wasteland, because the whole purpose of his weird bone temple isn't to like be scary and to like ward evil people away from him. It's to like to memorialize the people that they have lost during this infection, the countless people who would have otherwise just become random corpses in a pile. He takes what's left of them and he turns them into a piece of art in a way that kind of remember that like these people were here and these people were once a part of something. He talks about that too. He look all the different skulls. He's just like every single one of them held memories and had people that it cared about, and every single one of these lived at one point. So he loves the idea of preserving that. He doesn't want the humanity to be completely forgotten just because everything has fallen apart in England, you know? And I think that was a really, really nice sentence. I don't know, that was just a very nice moment and a very refreshing mindset for someone in this universe to have. They never said it in this movie, but I'm sure it will get brought up at some point again because the line is pretty much iconic at this point. But it goes hand in hand with the it's not so fucked up thing that they've always pushed with these movies, and especially the first one, and even kind of mentioned in the second one. You might remember what I mean, where Jim and Selena are talking about the state of the world and how they don't ever think things will be normal again. And Selena brings up the fact that she just says everything's all fucked. It's all fucked. And he goes, not everything is fucked, or something along the lines of that, because not everything is. And she's kind of reminded of that by when they meet Frank and Hannah, that there's still a reason. You know what I mean? There's still a reason to keep going, even if it doesn't seem like there is. And that was always one of my favorite things about the original, was that idea of pushing forward and staying strong and just staying alive despite the circumstances that you find yourself in. I'm getting kind of fucking like emotional here when I'm really thinking about that, because I've already been thinking about all this stuff since I've seen the movie, but actually having to put into words why I think it was so powerful is making me think about it a lot more, and it's making me it's hitting a lot. It did hit a lot when I saw the new movie as well, but I just love that messaging, and I love how this franchise has always been about like light in the darkness, you know, like a flower growing in a fucking garbage land, like a fucking field of trash. And they also tap into that too with the somewhat divisive idea of the infected woman giving birth, which at first I was kind of thrown off by, but when it kind of clicked for like what it meant, I was like, that's pretty cool. Because I kind of interpret it as a sense of, since I mean that kid was born to infected parents, but that kid was not born infected. And it's kind of like a metaphor for how children are born pure in a way, you know, they're born unaffected by like who their parents were before that necessarily. Like they're pretty much a fresh landscape. They haven't been molded by anything yet. Like the world hasn't changed them into what they're going to be. This kid was born a human still, pretty much. And it kind of ties into like how Spike was as a character too, because he He might have been born into this fucked up world where his dad isn't a very great person, but that doesn't really change the fact that he himself can be a good person, and he doesn't have to let this world change him for the worse. You know what I mean? And his mom dying of cancer was very powerful too, because it reminds us that, like, even though this is like a fantastical kind of fantasy world where zombies took over England and now rule, it's still very much real life. It's grounded in reality, and people can still get just sick and die, and it's tragic and unfortunate. And there's not really much you can do about it except for remember them and carry those memories with you, which is what Spike has to learn. And when he finally goes deep into the mainland, which was a really cool callback to the beginning of the movie, where he asks his father if you can go as far into the mainland to a point where you can't even see the ocean anymore. And in his letter to his father at the end of the movie, when he announces that he's not coming back to the island ever again, he's going to keep going, he says that same thing. He says, I'm going to go until I can't see the ocean anymore. And I thought that was a really, really powerful note to end the movie on. Now that I've kind of said my piece about why I think this movie's messaging and like deeper meanings are so cool, let me just talk about why this movie is cool as a zombie film as well. It very much brought back that exciting and interesting feeling that the first movie gives you the first time you see it, where you feel like you're going along with these characters for this larger than life adventure full of treachery and horrible things, and you can never quite predict what's gonna happen. You like even though I've seen a million zombie movies, when I first watched 28 Days Later all the way through, it still hit very hard, a lot of the big things in that movie, because it just hasn't really been done as well as that since. Like 28 Days Later is almost like 28 Days Later or Dawn of the Dead anyway, I'd say. The original are like the Jaws of zombie movies, where it's just somebody came along and they hit the note on the head exactly right. And even if zombie movies since then have been good or great, even, they're still not really as special as these ones are, because this one was just made by like the right people. They said pretty much everything you can say. And it was interesting that this film somehow manages to say more, even on top of that, which is just so cool. This movie is genuinely very unpredictable, and it is just such a fun roller coaster of a film to get through. There's all the action scenes that happen are exhilarating and so well shot. That camera rig that they created, like specifically for this movie, that had like 20 iPhones in a line, was some of the coolest shit I've ever seen. And the way that they used it in the movie was so unique too. I've never really seen I'm not saying that it hasn't been done before, but like I haven't personally seen anything like that really, where like, you know what I mean, like when they would shoot an arrow into one of the zombies' head and it would kind of freeze and rotate in a quick succession around their head and show you the whole fucking thing as they get shot back. Very, very cool way to shoot the action, and very unique. They perfectly brought back the feeling, because of all the first like 2 acts of this movie are kind of self-contained. They do go out into the mainland, but they don't really go that far, and then they return, and then all this shit happens on the island. But the third act of this movie very, very much feels like the first movie to me, where it brought back that same feeling of uncertainty as these people traverse across this fucking hellscape of a land, you know, with monsters that lurk around every corner. And they meet interesting and exciting side characters like Eric or the doctor that I'm forgetting the name of, sorry. While both of them might not have like a crazy amount of screen time in this movie, they still leave a lasting impact on the characters and you as well. Because like the characters in these movies that get introduced aren't just like interesting but likable characters. They are likable and interesting characters every time, but they use them in a very plot effective way too, where these people, the characters that the main characters in this movie meets and in like 28 Days Later, they help serve towards the plot and the purpose of the plot, and like they all kind of teach the main characters something. Like Frank in the original film connecting with Jim because Jim missed his father figure and kind of seeked one in Frank, but he kind of learns responsibility and that he needs to be like a protector of these people from Frank. And when Frank dies, it's kind of like an awakening moment for him, where he's like, I can't always rely on the solidarity of someone else coming to protect me. I need to stand up for myself and for those who I care for. I need to become the one who protects people, not just waiting for someone else to save the day. And a lot of the ways that's what happens to Spike a lot too. He learns a new sense of empathy from the doctor, an understanding of death and why it's not this just like evil end of the world thing. It's one of the worst feelings ever, and it sucks to lose someone that you love, but it's a necessary thing that we must live with, and it happens to all of us, but you can't let it destroy who you are. And Eric, while he is quite literally short-lived in this movie, he also teaches Spike a few lessons or two, because he gives him this interesting perspective from the outside of the world that didn't grow up like this, that Spike has never even heard of any of the things that this guy's fucking talking about. It reminds Spike and kind of lets him know that there's still a world out there, and there's still like things worth living for. There's still life happening, you know, there's still life, and there's still people living. And I think that's a really important thing for Spike to learn as a character, that there's still very much humanity out there, and there's still people who are willing to help, even though it doesn't really benefit them in any way. Because even though Eric is kind of a cocky, like douchey character, I thought he was really funny, but he is kind of a dick, like the mom says or whatever. He still did go out of his way to help them, to save their lives, and to help them get where they were going, just because, you know. And I think that was very important for Spike to see, that people still care. Just because things are horrible and all gone doesn't mean that they don't have empathy anymore, and he should still hold on to his. It's very valid for him to feel empathy, and his father kind of trying to force it out of him is not the way to go about it. Not only is this movie very emotionally impactful and very just well spoken in what the message that it's trying to get across, it's just such an exciting and exhilarating fun movie from beginning to end, that I feel like even if you don't pick up on a lot of like what this movie has to say, you'll still probably have fun watching the fucking insane cinematography and action on display here. And the coolest part about this too is that this is only the first movie in a new trilogy. And the fact that it works this well on its own as the first movie and doesn't hold back at all gets me very, very excited to see what lengths and risks that they're willing to take into sequels, considering this one was just right away unapologetically like, here I am. This is what this movie is. This is what we were creating for years. This has been our passion project. Like, we don't care if you like it. We like it, and that's what matters. A movie being divisive like this is just a sign of the fact that the movie takes risks, and I couldn't agree more with that. Like, the movie didn't play things safe, which it easily could have. It could have just played things completely safe like 28 Weeks Later and been like a standard zombie movie, but it didn't, because they didn't want to make a standard zombie movie, and I respect the shit out of that. And honestly, a lot of the people who have been hating on this movie, or hasn't been clicking for them for whatever reason, a lot of their points that I see them making, like I said, just don't feel accurate, or it feels like they didn't understand the movie that they just watched. It also seems like a lot of people wanted a more formulaic and predictable movie, and were upset that it wasn't exactly what they had imagined in their heads. Like, some of the reviews and like comments I was seeing on like trailers of this movie after it came out were straight up giving me flashbacks to when Longlegs came out, where this movie has such a viral marketing campaign that it gets so many people interested, and ones that don't even know anything about it, and then they go and see it and they get upset that the movie wasn't what they thought it was going to be, which is such a weird thing to me. Like, I don't understand why you want every movie you go see to be like exactly what you predicted it would be. That sounds extremely boring. And I don't understand why people say that they want new original ideas and movies that take risks if they don't like those movies when they come out. Like, it's all I ever see when when something like I Know What You Did Last Summer gets a new sequel. People are like, what happened to original movies? Why don't they make original movies anymore? And it's like, they do. The existence of sequels and remakes or whatever doesn't eliminate original movies as a concept. Original movies are still coming out all the time, and they're great. You guys just don't watch enough of them, and when you do, you don't like them for whatever reason. You say you want something new and original, but when a movie tries to be new and original, you're like, whoa, why isn't this like those other movies I like? I just don't get it. But yeah, I guess I probably could say more, but this has been going on for long enough already, and I already kind of plan on doing a follow-up discussion, very opinionated, heavy shit, whatever, with Gabriel Oliver, whenever he sees this movie. So if you're watching this video, Gabriel, and you made it this far, don't worry, I'm still down to do that podcast episode where we talk about this movie. I just wanted to get this out of my system because I had a lot of opinions on this movie I needed to express. So yeah, if you enjoyed this, keep a lookout for when that podcast episode comes out. I'm not entirely sure when it will happen, but I'm very excited to do that one. Very excited to have Gabriel back on again. You can check out the other Gabriel Oliver guest episode if you haven't seen that one yet. I guess I'll just end this by saying it's not as great as the original in my eyes, but this is still a pretty perfect movie and one of my favorite sequels that I have ever really seen. I can't wait to see where else they're taking this, and I don't know. It's still crazy that I exist in a timeline where my favorite movie got a sequel. And not only that, but it was a really, really good one too. I was like halfway through this movie and I still had that giddy feeling of like, holy shit, I can't believe I'm watching 28 years later right now. Like that's how important the first one is to me, that it almost didn't feel real. It was like, this can't be a movie that's happening right now. And I sorry, I spaced out for a second because I just remembered too that I saw Bring Her Back earlier this month, and I never talked about it. I never mentioned it yet. This is like the first podcast recording that I've done this month. The other ones were already kind of done last month. So I never really talked about Bring Her Back. I'll do that really quick before I wrap this up. That movie's sick. I still am not entirely sure if I like it more than Talk to Me. They're both kind of on the same level for me. I feel like the Felipe brothers are such promising and talented young directors, and I love that they are getting so much attention, and I can't wait to see what they do next. I can't wait to see Talk to Me. I can't wait to see what their next mystery horror project is that they're talking about. They're even making a documentary about wrestling, which I don't even really give a shit about wrestling, but I'll watch it just because it's them. But anyway, now that we've gone completely off topic like a million times, that's all I had to say. 28 Years Later is really good. I liked it a lot. Thanks for watching. See you next time. I'm not going to let this outro go on for any longer because then I'm going to get sidetracked again and talk about some other shit. And this has already been going on long enough. So see you next time. Bye-bye.